which requires a look at your calendar because we are exactly 1 month away from the start of the 2024 Big Ten football season. It's July 29th on Thursday, August 29th. Rutgers, Minnesota, and Illinois kick things off. The Rutgers and Illinois games can only be seen right here on the Big Ten Network. One night later, it's Michigan State and Wisconsin with Friday starts. You can see the Spartans game against FAU right here on Big Ten Network as well. The remainder of the league will open their respective schedules on Saturday, August 31st. You see that jam-packed slate. With the exception of USC, the Trojans will take on LSU in the Kickoff Classic on Sunday, September the 1st. And to get you ready for the season, we are thrilled to welcome in longtime college football insider Phil Steele. He needs no introduction to anyone that covers this sport. You read his preseason magazine. Phil, I call it a magazine. It's more like a tome with the thickness and the depth of your analysis. No, this is a crazy time for you, so we appreciate you taking a few moments to join us here on Big Ten Today.
Hey, always a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
So let's dive right into it, Phil. Many, and I know that you're included in this group, believe this could be the year that Ohio State gets back on top inside the Big Ten. What do you like about the Buckeyes?
Well, first of all, they've got Michigan to thank. They only lose 4 NFL draft picks, and I think that's because a lot of the guys don't have a pair of the gold pants. So they wanted to come back and actually beat Michigan. So only losing 4 draft picks, they already had a loaded roster. A lot of guys could have left. And then they added some key additions, like Quinshon Judkins coming in from Ole Miss, Caleb Downs coming in at safety spot, Will Howard at quarterback. So overall, this is a very talented team top to bottom. They've got my number 1 set of running backs in the country, my number 1 set of receivers, number 2 set of receivers in the country. So a very talented team.
Phil, if there is a question mark in Columbus, what do you think it would be?
The biggest one I would have would be at the quarterback spot. Will Howard step in and do well? And then maybe the offensive line, just a little. I've got the talent. I just haven't seen them produce up to their talent level the last couple of years. And the third one would be depth at running back. They only go 4 deep at running back. If Judkins and Henderson get banged up, they're dealing with true frosh. But overall, I still rate them my number 1 running back core.
Oregon is considered the co-favorite and expected by most to get to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. It's been an unbelievable 2-year run for Dan Lanning and what he's done. You lose Bo Nix. In comes Dillon Gabriel, highly touted quarterback, a guy who has college experience and who Lanning knows very well through the time when he was trying to recruit him back in the day. How well does Gabriel fit into what Lanning and this Duck offense wants to do?
You know, when Bo Nix came in, there was questions, how does Bo Nix fit the system? And Dan Lanning got the most out of him. Good news for Dillon Gabriel is they have my number 1 set of wide receivers in the country, or receiving core in the country, I should say, including tight ends. And also my number 3 rated offensive line in the country. So that's pretty good supporting cast for him. Also, when I went over the team with Coach Lanning, going over every position, I asked him about the quarterback, and he said that Dillon Gabriel reminds him a lot of Bo Nix in a lot of ways. So I think he's going to fit in seamlessly into this system with the supporting talent that he has.
You talk about Jordan James. You mentioned that receiving core, Tez Johnson. I mean, they have so many guys who can hurt you on the offensive side of the ball, and a Dan Lanning coach team is always going to be good on the defensive side. As for the defending Big Ten and national champions, Phil, I thought it was interesting. Sharon Moore did not back away at all from the expectations, despite what is basically a complete overhaul on both the player roster and the coaching staff. Realistically, what's possible for Moore during his first full year as head coach in Ann Arbor?
Well, let's look at the difference between this year and last year. Last year, they were number 7 on my experience chart. This year, they're all the way down at number 117. So it's a lot less experienced team. What's not different is they still have one of the best defenses in the country. They also have one of the best special teams in the country. So those are all good things. Now, offensively, there's question marks at quarterback. First of all, who's going to be the quarterback? And if they do, whoever wins the job, you don't expect stellar play from them. Also, the offensive line, being a member of the Joe Moore Award Committee, along with Coach DiNardo, who's on the Big Ten Network. They've had one of the best offensive lines the last 3 years. They lose all 5 starters. Now, if you have questions at quarterback and offensive line, you have questions. There are 2 big games which will determine Michigan's fate this year. They play Texas and Oregon at home. Now, if they were to win one of those two games, I say they make the playoff again at a 10-2 team. Yes, I'm already counting a loss at Ohio State, but we'll see what happens. But if they lose both those games, then I think making the playoff might be tough at 9-3. So splitting the Oregon-Texas games are huge. I believe they'll be favored in the other 9 games this year.
Yeah, 12-team playoff changes a little bit of everything for those teams that may not be inside the top 4 but still have a chance. You just have to get into that field to have a chance to be the national champion. Well, Iowa was in last year's champ game, Phil, despite the fact that they had the worst yards per play offense in the entire country. Of course, it helped that they had the best yards per play defense in the entire nation. We have a change. Brian Ferentz is out. Tim Lester, former head coach, comes in as OC. How much of a difference can he make, assuming that Cade McNamara is able to stay healthy throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, and I think Tim Lester is going to look pretty good at the end of the year because there's only one way to go is up, right? But keep in mind, if you look at last year's team, Cade McNamara wasn't 100% coming into the season. And then, of course, he got knocked out early. This top 2 receivers, both tight ends, knocked out before Big Ten play started. And the offensive line, while improved, still was lacking. I look at this year's offense. I see Cade McNamara. I like the fact that Brandon Sullivan's coming in at the quarterback spot behind him. They've improved the receiving core. They're deep at running back. And I look at the offensive line and I think it's the best since 2020. In 2020, they put up over 30 points per game. So overall, I think Lester's going to look good. This Iowa offense doesn't have to be great, but it just doesn't have to be poor. I think they'll be at least middle of the road this year. And if that's the case with that defense and that special teams, look out for the Hawkeyes. I think they're a playoff contender.
Phil, I'm among those who cover this league regularly who believes that Rutgers could have a breakout year. You look at their returning production, most notably Kyle Monungai back at running back. You look at a very favorable schedule for the Scarlet Knights that could see them being a favorite in a large majority of their first 9 games. What's your forecast for Greg Schiano's team?
Yeah, like you, Rick, I'm bullish on Rutgers this year. You look at the fact that they don't play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, or Oregon or Iowa, none of those 5 teams this year. They are a veteran squad, veteran offensive line. A lot's going to depend on the quarterback play. Now, with Kelly McManus coming in, he's reunited with his offense coordinator where he had success back at the end of 2022. So I think we can get good quarterback play out of him. They have 5 Big Ten home games this year. And here's a stat for you. Since they joined Big Ten play, which was, I believe, 10 years ago, they are 16-72 in Big Ten play. Their top season was 3 wins. I think they can win 6 Big Ten games this year. So big-time improvement. Not going to call them a Big Ten title contender, but I think when you go from a top of 3 Big Ten wins all the way up to 6, you're going to have yourself a good season. Love the schedule this year.
I am absolutely on board. All right, lastly, Phil, how do you think the addition of the West Coast schools, all the logistics with travel, the changing schedule, and a divisionless Big Ten standings page will ultimately affect what we see on the field?
Well, first of all, being a magazine writer, having to predict an 18-team conference is pretty difficult. I'll go there, but I think it's a great addition. You go back to last year. I thought at the end of the year, the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 were all right at the very top. The Pac-12 had its best season in over a decade, and the Big Ten gets 4 of the top 5 teams from the Pac-12 from last year. So the overall talent is there, and I think it's going to be a fun season, especially with the new venues. And the other thing I look at is that for the playoffs this year, Rick, I see, the ACC champ, the Big 12 champ, the Group of 5 champ, and Notre Dame all making a playoff. But there's 8 spots open. I think the SEC gets 4. The Big 10 gets 4. It's going to be that type of year. So I think it's going to be a fun year for the Big 10.
So much change, so much to be excited about, and so much great info from Phil Steele. Phil, great to catch up. Look forward to chatting with you throughout the course of the 2024 season.
Always enjoy the conversations, Rick. Thanks for having me on.